Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the GSU Book Club. I'm Cheryl Johnson Ransaw, Director of Employee Development and Wellness Services, accompanied by Ryan Smith, our Wellness Program Administrator, and we are here to offer our regular hosting of the GSU Book Club. If this is your first time attending, we're glad to have you join us. If you have attended before, we say welcome back. And, and today our book club selection is How Not to Kill Yourself, Nancy Martin. I just want to take a few minutes to go over some book club ground rules. Certainly, this is a gathering that we encourage everyone to feel comfortable and relaxed, and we encourage that everyone be an active listener and focus on respectful and productive conversations and ask for clarification on confusing or troubling statements. This is an opportunity certainly for us to present highlights on the books that are selected each gathering. We also know that this is an opportunity for you to provide some feedback and respond to questions or raise questions and concerns if you have them. So this is an open forum. We will be recording today's session that will be made available for everyone. And if you have any questions, so feel free to use the chat box. We will be monitoring the chat box throughout the session. And if you want to speak, you certainly may make that known as well, but we encourage everyone to make use of the chat box for communications. Sorry about that. So the first question we'd like to really raise to the group is, what were some initial thoughts when you heard about the May Book Club selection? I just want to open it up to invite comments and for you to share whatever thoughts you might have. And while you're thinking and reflecting, we realize that a lot of times people have not had an opportunity to read the books that are selected in advance, and that's not a requirement of this gathering ever. We certainly invite people to check out the books and to read them if there is an interest and an opportunity, but there doesn't need to be any pressure applied. And as we go through today's session, certainly if you don't have comments about the book because you haven't read it, that's fine too. Okay, so I see there's one comment in the chat box. Someone has noted that there was a thought of just feeling surprised about the topic of today's selection. And to go further to share that this seems like a topic that no one would bring up at work, but also the thought is one of that this is good to bring awareness to the topic. So thank you for that comment. And see another person has shared the same thoughts as well. Thank you. And I'm having some technical challenges, so please bear with me. My mouse is really getting away from me. Well, we are observing in the month of May, Mental Health Awareness Month. And as we did some planning and thoughts around what book we might select during this month. Um, Certainly because we are proponents of really encouraging that we have conversations about mental health, how important it is equally to address mental health as well as physical health. And when there are opportunities that present themselves where we can have conversations, and that's part of what we do as a worksite wellness unit. And in considering some topics, some book selections for um, observance of Mental Health Awareness Month, we've done a lot of research and came across the book that has been selected for today on the subject of suicide. And certainly we know that this is a tough topic for discussion, but also as we have come to learn in a lot of the research that we've been doing and providing education as well, suicide is an important topic because it's a growing concern in terms of what we're finding from the data. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. And it's been noted that suicide rates are highest among adults ages 45 to 64. And these numbers certainly changed. This is from a source that we've identified through Mental Health America, an association that's pretty well known. And so as the data is collected, certainly they're trying to provide and share it. But it's ever changing. But in terms of most recent data, it also cites that suicide is the second leading cause of death among ages 15 to 24. A couple other notable information items we want to share. Those with substance abuse disorders are 6 times more likely to commit suicide than those without. So that's a pretty alarming statistics. And in 2020, it was reported that 12.2 million adults approximately had reported having serious thoughts of suicide. So certainly that says that people are asked the tough questions and inquiries are being made, that people are coming forth and sharing, at least acknowledging having thoughts. Now, what happens beyond that point, that gets into another layer of heavy thought and discussion, but certainly, again, this is noteworthy to just share the fact that this is an important topic and certainly one that is, we know, tough to address. And as we decided to present this particular book for today's selection, we wanted to also do research as we were considering it on what the critics were saying about it. How is it viewed among many different sources? And so I want to spend a few minutes just identifying and sharing some information from the critics' review perspectives. So first of all, this book was published in 2023. It's a Pantheon book, which is a division of Random House. It is recognized as one of Time's 100 must-read books of the year. It is recognized as one of the Boston Globe's 55 books we loved this year. And also, it's one of the New York Times Book Review's critics' picks. Some other noteworthy commentary about the book from the New York Times. It's quoted saying, "A rock for people who've been troubled by suicidal ideation or have someone in their lives who is." From Esquire, "A deep meditation that searches through Martin's past, looking for answers about why he is the way he is, while also examining the role suicide has played in our culture for centuries. how it has evolved and how philosophers have examined it. Oops. And last, a quote from Jameson Webster, a psychoanalyst who's in private practice. This was an article that was printed in the Washington Post. And he wrote that I admire this book, admire what it wants to do and be, whether it helps, I think might depend on which side of the wall between hope and hopelessness that the reader is on. And certainly, if anyone has any reactions to those quotes, please feel free to enter that in the chat. Well, let's talk about the author. Who is Clancy Martin? Professionally, he's a Canadian philosopher, novelist, essayist. He is considered an acclaimed author of his most recent book prior to the one we are addressing, How to Sell. He has been recognized as a Guggenheim Fellow. He's earned a PhD degree in philosophy from the University of Texas at Austin. And currently he is a professor of philosophy at University of Missouri at Kansas City, as well as at Ashoka University in New Delhi. Well, let's talk about the author in terms of his personal and family life. He's age 55. He's been married 3 times. He is currently married. He has 5 children. And by his own admission, he's a recovering alcoholic. And he is also, by his own admission, a survivor of more than 10 suicides. The first attempt was jumping in front of a bus at age 6. And the last attempt was in his basement using a dog leash to try to strangle himself. More about the author. He's the second of 3 siblings. His parents divorced when he was age 5, which we learn later has some tremendous significance for him. His father was a self-identified alcoholic, was allegedly abusive, particularly toward the author's mother. He died in a psychiatric hospital. There are questions about the cause of his death, but there is a strong suspicion that he successfully committed suicide. And he reportedly had a history of suicidal attempts as well. And at the time of his death, the author, Clancy Martin, was age 30. The author's mother remarried his father's AA sponsor. So his father had been very active in Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's significant that his mother married his father's AA sponsor, who had children from previous relationships, a total of 7 children. And it's also noteworthy that 2 of the author's step siblings attempted suicide jumping from buildings, and one fatally, successfully died from jumping off a building at age 21. And the author, Clancy, was age 6 at the time. So that too is pretty significant in terms of his background. And I'll pause here to see if there's some comments in the chat box. So there's one comment in the box about someone close to them has recently been struggling with thoughts of suicide. So it's good to know this book is for the loved ones who want to understand how to be a better help. And this attendee is saying that they'd like to order the book now. So thank you for sharing that information. And so speaking about the author, in his own words, quote, I wrote this book especially for the people like me, many of whom I have come to know over the past 30 years, who have attempted suicide and failed, and who still struggle with the desire to kill themselves. So as we get a handle on this author and what he has written, we'd like to share a brief YouTube video clip and hear from the author directly.
Hi, I'm Clancy Martin, and I'm the author of How Not to Kill Yourself. Many people have emailed me at all hours of the day and night to say they had read something of mine about suicide online, usually while Googling how to kill themselves, and decided not to do it. So I thought it was time for me to tell my whole story and really put all my heart into it. Also, years ago, a teacher I respect told me I should write a book to help people, and I hope that this may be that book. No, I don't, because every time I do, so many people respond with generosity and care, and very often very unexpectedly, have suicide attempt stories of their own. Also, I believe the best medicine for suicidal thinking is informed, caring, honest talk about suicide. That suicide is an impulsive act, that it comes out of the blue, that it shows cowardice, selfishness, or a weak will. People should know that most suicides are the product of a pattern of thinking, often years in the making, and that the suicidal person generally deeply regrets and even despises the act of taking their own life, and has probably fought against it as fiercely as they could before relenting in an actual attempt. For those who feel suicidal, I hope they'll get some relief, some acceptance, and the comfort that they are not alone, and practical techniques for living with and perhaps even being liberated from those feelings. Also, the recognition that they have a great superpower, which is the ability to help other suicidal people. For those who have lost loved ones to suicide or have a suicidal person in their lives, I hope they can find some solace and acceptance and perhaps freedom from any guilt they may suffer. And for those who are confused or mystified by the suicidal person, I hope they'll find concern, understanding, and compassion.
Okay. So I wonder if we might open it up and invite you to share with us your thoughts about the author's stated reasons for writing this book. Anyone have any thoughts they'd like to enter? Let's see. There's some comments in the chat box that this clip was very powerful. His words on having caring, informed conversations about suicide, being able to help people resonated with someone. Thank you. Thank you for these comments. I also want to just raise the question uh, and pause for a minute to ask about thoughts around the topic of suicide, whether you think it is a difficult topic to discuss, and if so, why? I think we had an earlier comment that referenced that in terms of talking about it at work. Um, and really just want to pause and expand on the thoughts around this subject and invite anyone to share comments about what might cause this to be a difficult topic. And if you have other thoughts, certainly that is welcome also. Um, again, this is about just recognizing people have different perspectives, different reactions or responses based on lots of different factors. And so we just want to be respectful of that. See, there are comments just acknowledging that um, this does appear to be a difficult topic to discuss, and that the topic is kind of taboo. And thank you for those comments that you've entered so far. See, there are other comments coming in the chat box that um, this tough topic is one that, and perhaps because something has to be really wrong with you if you're considering ending your life. And thank you for that comment, and others who kind of agree with that comment or share that comment as well. Um, certainly when you just think about the topic itself, clearly, someone ending a life, that's as serious as it gets. And clearly, it raises lots of questions, typically more questions than answers in terms of what's happening with an individual that might have those thoughts or to take action to commit suicide. And again, it's tough, it's puzzling, it's not something that's a simple answer necessarily, but our purpose today and beyond today is certainly one of at least offering safe spaces where we might have conversations like this, and certainly invite people to find other spaces and places and help when needed to address these issues, because certainly the topic of suicide itself is serious and should not be ignored, as difficult as it might be to address. See, there are other comments that are coming in the chat box. Thank you. One comment is referencing that people may have suicidal thoughts, but not always attempt suicide, and that they are just negative thoughts. And thank you for that. That comment. That's actually something that the author talks about in his book. And again, it's so complex, and it certainly does vary in terms of um, the perspectives and the reasons, the factors that may contribute to individuals struggling. But again, the bigger umbrella that we're talking about really is mental health concerns, mental illness for some people, substance abuse related concerns, psychosocial concerns that, so many variables that may contribute to people struggling with suicidal thoughts and taking actions. But again, it's whatever the reasons may be, we certainly encourage that people try to seek help, um, get help for their concerns. We want to spend a few minutes highlighting the author's book. It is a heavy 400 plus page book that covers so many perspectives. Obviously, we've heard from the author in terms of his motivation, his own story, but clearly the book, in all sincerity, is an opportunity for the author to share his story, his journey, his struggles, but he's also incorporating so much more. And if you haven't read the book, or if you think you might want to read the book, certainly um, it's there's a lot of material, a lot of complexities, a lot of layers. Simply put, the book is based on three sections or three parts. And the first part is titled Suicidal Tendencies. It talks generally and specifically about how people become suicidal. And again, woven into every chapter, the author talks about his journey, his story. And because he is a philosopher and he's currently teaching classes, it's interesting because he, even in this first part, talks about having discussions in his classroom. So he apparently has been very vocal as an educator and in his own research in addressing the topic of suicide, among so many others. But in this first part, he references having had some discussions in his classes and talks about one of his students who discloses that he has struggled with depression, suicidal ideation, and shared some of his own struggles with suicidal thoughts as early as age 3 and 4. And so it's pretty concerning how the author writes with such detail and specifics, but again, he lays it out and uses his classroom as one opportunity, as I say, to not only invite the students to talk about their personal journey, but in sharing his own as well. There's a section on, quote, your mom and dad, part 1 in this first section. And in this section, the author really gets into a great deal of details about his family of origin, his struggles, the significant events that really had a tremendous impact on him, and specifically referencing particularly his father, who I mentioned earlier, um, struggled with alcohol as well as psychiatric problems, and the question of his depression and suicidal journey as well. But the author talks about his father's death being one that he carries a heavy guilt feeling, because apparently um, there was a close relationship that they had, but because his father had such a deteriorating journey of his own in terms of mental illness, the author struggled with trying to do some separating, some distancing, and some help with his siblings in terms of how they might approach their father. But in short, toward the very end of his father's death, the author refused to help him get out of the psychiatric hospital where he had been for some time. And apparently, not long after his father made his last plea for his son to help him get discharged, that's when his father was discovered deceased, and the question of the suicide attempt came up. So this was, as the author put it, a tremendously significant occurrence that impacted him, as well as just what had occurred earlier in his life when he was age 5 and his parents divorced. And as I also referenced, he talked about, in addition to the growing up around the alcohol and substance abuse in the home, but because his father was reportedly physically abusive toward his mother, that also had a tremendous impact on him. And so this was a noteworthy section, and the point of recognizing certainly that everybody has issues within their family of origin. We can all kind of examine, our journeys, our relationships. And for this author, though, the point of addressing his parents and family of origin was significant for him. And he's also citing that this is probably the case for a lot of people in terms of influences, both positive and negative, in terms of our families of origin. The second section is One Foot in the Grave, and he describes what a person in crisis looks like. And again, he certainly tells his story. And again, because it's so complicated and in such depth and detail, that to stay at a high level of just mentioning it, and how he also talks about other struggles, again, both either people he's known, friends, other relatives who've struggled. He has done research on just well-known people, or people who are researchers or other philosophers who kind of chime in and have written about suicide and mental illness. So it's another section that's packed with a lot of information. He also, though, talks about how acknowledging that this has been a lifelong journey for him, that it's something that he does recognize that with help, it has made a difference. And so, as we heard in his clip, he does want to, throughout the book, talk about the importance of trying to keep trying and trying to seek out help and encouraging others to do the same. And so in the third section of the book, The Long Road Back, now we might move beyond the need to kill ourselves. He certainly talks about a lot his approach, his road to recovery, his use of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's something that's talked about throughout the book, and that really was one of the single most identified resources that he consistently discusses, and to this day apparently has some positive connections. It feels that there's been a positive benefit to participating in Alcoholics Anonymous. He also gets into his psyche around, what has been his lifelong struggle, other factors, what has helped him, motivated him to try to stay the course, to try to stay alive. And he pretty consistently comes back to the fact of family and the fact that he does have children. And he also talks about in his struggle with dealing with depression and suicidal thoughts and substance abuse, that he is just guilt ridden because he knows that his past has been one that has had a tremendous impact on his children. And in his second marriage that ended in divorce, he had 3 young children who he had apparently just not been very close to because of his struggles, but because of how that played out um, with ending in divorce and some very strict restrictions placed on him in terms of his custody and visitation privileges. That has been a driving force for him to try to get his act together, if you will, and try to stay the course, to do the right thing, and to be there for his children. It's interesting that in this part 2 section of your mom and dad, um, he's really taking a lot of ownership. So although he has referenced still, the impact that his parents have had on him, particularly his father, in this second section, he's really taking some ownership, and in great detail is talking about what he's had to do to, first of all, look back and acknowledge the errors of his ways, if you will, and look at what he's had to do, including um, at some point in his life having to take a random urine test because of his ex-wife restrictions, and supervised visits with his children. And he has at some points in time had to wear alcohol monitoring anklets to monitor his relapses. So there's just a lot packed into this last section as well. Um, and then the last chapter, and moving into the appendix 1 and 2, he actually talks about the things that are helping him, certainly beyond the motivation of wanting to be a better parent, be a better husband. He identifies some specifics that he's trying to do on a regular basis in terms of self-care, as we talk about it. And so he certainly talks about the motivations around the family. He speaks to exercise as something that he doesn't love to do, but he quote does it out of fear of my own brain. And he says that exercise certainly helps him in terms of just feeling less depressed less often. And yet it is certainly still all about the work that he has to do to try to stay the course. He's certainly trying to avoid alcohol and other substances. And again, as I mentioned, AA has played a big role in helping him stay the course. He talks about reducing his cost of living and expenses, and how he's just trying to be more mindful around finances, which apparently in the past has been a struggle for him as well. He talks about trying to be more patient and willing to just wait for some of the things that he desires to do, which again has been a struggle for him throughout his life. And he also talks about trying to find ways to relax and just focusing on pacing himself better in terms of setting goals, focusing on one goal at a time, and needing to learn how to be more patient in terms of not always achieving as much as he would like to achieve. I see some of the comments in the chat. I guess it certainly seems like he has gone through a lot, and there's no doubt about that throughout the book. It does come to a close, though, in terms of the last couple of sections, again, as he talks about feeling at a good place and feeling really pretty clean and sober, if you will, for the last several years. Um, and in the appendix one, he makes a really good effort to share tools for crisis resources. So for the readers, for people who are struggling, who he has a strong need to help, he has literally researched and gathered in some sources from his own personal experiences, has listed a lot of national and international some resources for people to get help, including some crisis lines, and he's identified some specific treatment facilities that are fairly well known and reputable, that he just encourages people, bottom line, to try to seek help and try to take action, and his way of trying to offer some information that might be helpful to make a difference in others' lives. Um, the second dependent, in case of emergency, has some interesting interviews that he's conducted with some people, some well-known, others not so well-known, but people speaking from perspectives of either personal experience with struggles with mental health issues, as well as just working and in the field of serving others, and trying to offer more insights for people who may be open to receiving them. He's interviewed a lot of interesting persons, as I mentioned before, but a lot of philosophers. He's really referenced throughout the book some information around Buddhism, and has interviewed some scholars on that subject of Buddhism. And it's really just quite fascinating how he has packaged and, as I said, packed all of this information into the one book. I'm going to pause here and see if there are any other thoughts about what we've covered. One final quote from the author. He says, "You won't overcome them," referring to problems, "just by talking about them, but until you do, you won't get the help you need." And so again, his bottom line message that's pretty consistent is really encouraging people to talk about their feelings and struggles, and to find the support, the help. If particularly people are struggling and don't have a support system, that he is certainly a proponent of that. So I want to pause and ask if anyone might want to address the question of what are some barriers that might prevent people from getting help for mental health and substance abuse related problems. We've certainly touched on specifics around suicide, but even the broader topic of mental health related problems and substance abuse related problems. Wonder if anyone has some thoughts about what some of the barriers might be that prevent people from getting the help they might need. So I see one comment, money and no insurance. Certainly that those are two major factors. Thank you for those comments. So resources, not everyone certainly has the resources in certain populations, certain groups, subgroups. cultures, and even people who may be considered employed and earning incomes can certainly be struggling with finances and not having perhaps coverage or sufficient coverage to get help. See another comment in the chat that identifies with the quote, this last quote that we referenced, that admitting that you have a problem can be hard sometimes. Absolutely. And even if you do seek the help, there's the shared comment around identifying money may be an issue for some people. Absolutely. But certainly that first step of just admitting there's a problem, there's a need to address a problem, and that's something the individual self has to come to terms with, to really act on, can be a major hurdle, a major barrier. And as we have also talked about, as we've promoted awareness around mental health and wanting to end the stigma, we know that there is still a stigma associated, and that makes it even harder. I think we look back that perhaps we've come a long way with addressing this stigma, but there's just certainly still work to do. That's never ending. And so again, our belief is that we just want to encourage the conversations. The more we talk about it and normalize it, the better for everybody. But it won't happen if we don't make the efforts, that's for sure. So some last questions, just want to ask, what are some takeaway thoughts about today's book selection, final thoughts that anyone might want to share? And I appreciate what you've certainly already shared. And just looks like we have some people who are interested in getting the book to read it, and that's great that there's an interest in doing so. Okay, well, I'm going to pause here and transition to Ryan, who's going to talk about EDWS and tools and resources.
Thank you, Cheryl. So we wanted to highlight just a few of the resources that we offer for Georgia State employees, as well as their spouses and household members. So health coaching, we do offer health coaching, and we can offer health coaching on a variety of different topics, including nutrition and stress management. So if you're looking for some one-on-one help, either working on just your diet and your nutrition plan, or working on managing stress in your life, you can give us a call with the phone number on screen there. We also offer faculty and staff assistance. And as we talk about mental health resources, this is truly one of the best that we offer. This gives you the opportunity to any issue that you might be facing, whether it's related to work or whether it's just entirely outside of work. You can schedule an appointment by emailing fasa@gsu.edu. We have our main phone number there where you can schedule an appointment. And there's also a crisis number on screen so that 24/7, 365 days out of the year, if you're experiencing an issue that you need assistance with, that number is available for those emergencies. Similarly, the university system offers the Essentra Health Employee Assistance Program. This is another program designed to help you handle any hardship or issue you might be facing, whether it's emotional, whether it's related to your job, whether it's financial. this is a great place to get started and assist you with some resources. You can go to usg.mylifeexpert.com and use the company code USGCares, or you can schedule an appointment by calling the phone number listed on the screen there. And similar to FAFSA, that service is available 24/7, 365 days out of the year. Finally, we have our tobacco cessation program, where if you are looking to quit using tobacco, that's one of the best things you can do for your health, but it is a challenge. Thankfully, you don't have to do it alone. There are programs here at Georgia State to offer you support. And next, we want to just highlight some of the upcoming events we have. Because this is, we're observing mental health this month, we wanted to make sure that we included some great mental health related options. This Thursday, May 16th, we're going to have a special mental health session titled Recognize and Respond for Managers. So this is to help managers better identify when employees that they supervise may be facing difficult mental health related issues or hardships. That's going to be from 12 to 1 p.m. We have I see a question, would it be possible to email the resources? Yes, absolutely. We'll have a follow-up email where we'll give you access to these resources. Also worth noting is that if you go to our EDWS page, which I'll link to in the chat here in just a moment, you can get access to all of these great resources. In fact, here, let me include that right now. So we'll send out some information, but if you go to that link there, it's going to have a link to all of our different services, our website, our events calendar. You'll see faculty and staff assistance. You'll see that Centra Health Employee Assistance Program, and you'll see the calendar of our events. So that's a great one-stop shop if you want to access something right now. We'll have a live cooking demonstration on May 23rd, and that'll be from noon until 12:30. We'll have a virtual guided meditation Friday, May 24th from 12 to 12:30. On Tuesday, May 28th, we'll have a snack and share support group, which is just an hour-long session to just share some of the things that may be affecting you in your life, be able to get some things off your chest in a closed and safe environment. And then on Thursday, May 30th, we'll have another mental health recognize and respond session, but this one is specifically for employees to help you navigate different situations and learn how you can recognize and respond to some of those mental health issues that may arise. So all of these events are on the wellness events calendar. So if you'd like to go register for any of those, they're there. They are also on the GSU calendar, as well as the USG Wellbeing calendar. So we encourage you to access those resources and take advantage of these offerings that are here at the university. All right. And with that being said, I'd just like to thank everyone for attending today, and certainly thank you to Cheryl for leading us through what was, of course, a very, very fascinating book club entry. So if you all keep an eye out in your email, you'll be getting a link to some follow-up resources where you can view the recording of this presentation or access some of the other offerings we talked about today. That being said, I hope everyone has a great rest of their day and a pleasant week, and we hope to see you at one of the sessions soon. Take care.